Every culture has looked up and asked the same impossible question. Where did all of this come from? You are about to witness 25 of the most astonishing answers ever conceived by the human imagination. By the end, you will hold a global map of our deepest cosmic curiosities, a testament to how we've tried to make sense of the infinite. You will hear of a universe born from a single cracked egg, and a world sung into existence by a rainbow serpent. You will see how a story can turn chaos into order and a void into a home. What is the strangest origin story you've ever heard? Our journey begins with a sound heard across the void. A single sharp crack. In the ancient Chinese tradition, before time itself had meaning, there was only a swirling, formless chaos. It was not empty. It was a potential, a dense and silent mass containing everything that would ever be, often envisioned as a perfect dark egg. And within that cosmic egg, a being named Pangu slept for 18,000 years. This is not a story of a creator speaking a command. It is a story of awakening, of a primal, physical effort. When Pangu finally stirred from his long slumber, he stretched his colossal limbs. The shell, unable to contain this sudden movement, fractured. That first crack was the first event. The universe was born not from a word but from an action. The contents of the egg then began to separate according to their nature. The lighter, brighter, and purer elements full of energy and light drifted upward. They became the sky, what is known as Yong. The heavier, darker, and more solid elements sank downward, coalescing into the earth, the principle of yin. But here is the crucial, heroic part of the tale. Pangu saw that these two halves, sky and earth, wanted to rush back together into that primordial chaos. So he placed himself between them. He planted his feet on the sinking earth and pushed his hands against the rising sky. And for another 18,000 years he held them apart, growing taller each day as the distance between them increased. He was the pillar of creation. Only when the cosmos was stable, only when the separation was complete and permanent, did his great task end. In his death, Pangu performed one final act of creation. His breath became the wind and clouds, his voice became the rolling thunder, his left eye transformed into the radiant sun, and his right eye became the gentle moon. His blood flowed out to form the great rivers and oceans, his muscles became the fertile land, and his bones the mountains and stones. The fleas on his fur were carried by the wind to become the animals and people of the world. This is a myth of profound sacrifice and unity. The universe is not something separate from its creator, it is the creator transformed. Every mountain is Pangu's bone, every river is his lifeblood, every gust of wind is his final breath. It presents a powerful, visceral idea. Order does not simply appear, it is wrestled from chaos through immense effort and ultimate sacrifice to create a stable home for everything that follows. Pangu's sacrifice created a world of distinct parts, but what if the universe was not made through division, but through a song? From the ancient stillness of a Chinese cosmic egg, we travel to the sun-baked red earth of Australia, to a concept of creation so profound it defies linear time. This is the dream time. For the Aboriginal peoples, the world was not made once and left behind. It is being sung right now in a continuous act of remembrance and connection. The Dreamtime, or Tijukurpa, is not a distant past. It is a parallel, eternal reality, a sacred dimension where the ancestral beings walked. In the beginning, the earth was a flat, featureless plain, asleep and waiting. Then the ancestors awoke. They took forms we might recognize, like the immense and powerful rainbow serpent, but also kangaroo ancestors, emu ancestors, honey ant ancestors. These beings did not command the world into being, they sang it. As they journeyed across the barren landscape, their songs spilled from their very essence. Every note, every rhythm was a creative force. Where the rainbow serpent slid, her body carved out deep riverbeds and gorges. Where she rested, her coiled form created waterholes and mountains. The vibrations of her song gave the land its shape and its spirit. A particular rock formation is not just stone, it is the physical memory of an ancestor's pause. A specific constellation of stars is not a random pattern. It is the glowing embers of a campfire where those ancestors rested, or the markings they left in the sky as a map for those who would follow. This is a myth of intimate belonging. Every creek, every hill, every animal and plant exists because a specific ancestor performed a specific song, and those songs were not lost. They were passed down through countless generations in stories, dances, and art. To sing the song of the honey ant ancestor while walking the path he walked is not just a retelling, it is a participation. It is a way of keeping the world alive, of maintaining the very fabric of reality through ritual. The land is a living library, and every feature is a page in an epic story that is still being written. Where Pangu's story is one of heroic separation, the dream time is one of eternal, spiritual weaving. The universe here is not a finished object but a relationship, a conversation between the people and the timeless songlines that cradle their world. The universe as a living song is a breathtaking concept, but what if the cosmos was not a melody, but a living, breathing organism, one that feels pain and faces decay? Our third myth transports us from the sun-drenched songlines to the stark, icy realms of Norse mythology. Here, the cosmos is not a flat plane or a separated sky and earth. It is a tree, an immense sacred ash tree named Yggdrasil, the world tree, and it holds everything together. This is a universe that is profoundly organic, interconnected, and under constant siege. Imagine not living on a planet, but within the branches of a single cosmic entity. Yggdrasil's roots do not simply dig into soil, they plunge deep into three separate foundational wells. One root reaches the well of Erd, a spring of fate and wisdom where the gods hold their councils. Another stretches into Jotunheim, the chaotic land of the frost giants. A third descends into Niflheim, a cold, misty underworld, and high above, cradled in its vast branches, are the 9 distinct worlds. There is Asgard, the shining fortress of the gods. There is Midgard, our own world, encircled by a great serpent in the ocean. There is Alfheim, home of the light elves, and Svartalfheim, the realm of the dwarves. This is a cosmology of vertical layers and profound connection. The squirrel Ratatoska runs up and down the trunk, carrying insults between the eagle perched at the top and the dragon coiled below. That dragon is Nidhogg, a monstrous serpent who perpetually gnaws at the roots of Yggdrasil, and he is not alone. 4 great stags nibble at its leaves. This is the crucial, haunting detail. The Norse universe is not a static, perfect creation. It is alive, and therefore it is vulnerable. It feels the pain of these attacks. It suffers decay. The myth tells of a constant, desperate effort to maintain balance. The gods water the roots to keep the tree healthy. The 3 Norns, the goddesses of fate, tend to the well of Erd, weaving the destinies of all beings. This is a cosmos in a state of dynamic, fragile tension. Creation is not a one-time event that produced a stable, finished product. It is an ongoing struggle against forces of entropy and chaos, a daily effort to preserve order and life against those who would unravel it all from below. The world tree is not just a map of the universe, it is a symbol of resilience. It stands, enduring the pain, holding the worlds apart and together. A living testament to the idea that existence itself is a precarious, heroic act of maintenance. But a universe that feels pain is not the only one born from a struggle. From the cold, gnawing roots of Yggdrasil, we descend into a different kind of chaos, one that is not formless mist, but a dark and endless ocean. This is the myth of ancient Egypt, a story that begins not with a song or a sacrifice, but with a singular, lonely act of will. Before anything we would recognize existed, there was only none. None was not a god in the traditional sense. It was the primordial waters, a boundless, dark, and inert ocean of pure potential and chaos. There was no up or down, no light or life, only this silent, infinite deep. And from within this watery nothingness, the god Atum simply decided to be. He willed himself into existence. This is a profound starting point. Creation begins with consciousness, with a self-aware spark emerging from the unconscious void. Atum, whose name means the complete one, stood alone on the first thing that was not water. In some versions, he created a mound of earth, the Benben stone, rising from the waters. In others, he himself was that mound. This was the first solid ground in existence, the prototype for every pyramid and temple that would later point toward the heavens. But Atum was alone, and a universe cannot be built by one, so he created companions. The method is startlingly physical. In one telling, he spat. In another, more direct version, he used his own hand. From this act, he produced the first two gods, Shu and Tefnut. Shu was the god of air, of empty space and life-giving breath. Tefnut was the goddess of moisture, of order and cosmic law. Here, the fundamental elements of a functioning world are not separated from chaos, but are born from the Creator's own essence. Air and moisture, the invisible forces that make life possible, emerge first. Shu and Tefnut then gave birth to the next generation, Geb and Nut. Geb was the earth, often depicted as a man lying beneath the sky. Nut was the sky, a woman whose star-studded body arched over him. In the beginning, they were locked in a tight, eternal embrace, a single entity of earth and sky. There was no room for anything else to exist between them. So Shu, the air, did what air does. He inserted himself between his children. He pushed Nut high above and held Geb firmly below, forcing the space that would become the world. This is not a violent separation, but a necessary one, creating the breathable atmosphere where life could flourish. And this established the beautiful, daily drama of the Egyptian cosmos. Nut the sky swallows the sun god Ra each evening. He travels through her body during the night, and she gives birth to him anew each dawn. The cycle of day and night is not a mechanical orbit, but a divine story of death and rebirth played out across the body of the mother sky. This myth presents a cosmos that is deeply interconnected and familial. The air holds up the sky gives birth to the sun, and the earth lies below, supporting all life. It is a universe born from loneliness, shaped by intimate acts, and maintained by the enduring, loving tension between its elemental parts. But a universe held together by family ties can also be torn apart by them. The story of creation now shifts from the intimate separations of Egypt to a cosmic battlefield, where order is not born from will or song, but forged in a violent, divine revolution. This is the Babylonian Enuma Elish, a myth that begins with a watery mingling and ends with a thunder god crafting the world from a corpse. Long before the heavens had a name, there existed only two primordial beings. Apsu was the sweet, fresh waters, a calm and quiet male principle. Tiamat was the salt waters, a vast, churning, and monstrous female dragon embodying the chaos of the sea. They flowed together, their waters mingling, and from this union the first generations of gods were born. But these younger gods were not serene. They were vibrant, energetic, and loud. Their laughter and celebrations created a din that echoed through the silent void, a noise that represented the disruptive force of new life and new energy. This noise became unbearable to Apsu, who craved the original stillness. He saw the younger gods not as his children, but as a disturbance in the perfect, quiet order of the beginning. So he devised a plan. He would return to that silence by destroying them all. But one of the younger gods, the clever E, learned of the plot. He did not wait to be destroyed. In a preemptive strike, E cast a powerful spell of sleep upon Apsu, then killed him. He built his own dwelling place upon the sweet god's still body, a realm called the Apsu, establishing the first fixed point of order upon the corpse of the old. This act, however, unleashed a far greater terror. Tiamat, the saltwater dragon of chaos, had tolerated the noise of her children, but the murder of her husband, her primordial partner, sent her into a rage beyond measure. She was no longer a passive, mingling force. She transformed into the ultimate enemy of order. She created an army of monstrous serpents, scorpion men, and demons, creatures with venom for blood. To lead this terrifying host, she appointed her new consort, the god Kingu, and gave him the tablets of destiny, which held the power to command the fates of the universe. The younger gods, who had once been so boisterous, were now paralyzed with fear. None of them dared to face Tiamat and her horrific legions. In their desperation, they needed a champion, a leader of immense power. They turned to Marduk, the storm god, the son of E. He agreed to confront Tiamat, but only on one condition. If he succeeded, he must be granted supreme and unchallenged authority over all the gods. They agreed. What followed was the ultimate clash. Marduk, armed with a net, a bow, and his devastating winds, rode his storm chariot into battle against the roiling dragon of chaos. As Tiamat opened her massive jaws to swallow him, Marduk drove the winds into her mouth, inflating her body until she could not close it. He then shot a single arrow straight into her heart, killing her. With a primordial dragon slain, the work of creation could truly begin. Marduk did not simply dispose of Tiamat's body. He took her colossal corpse and, in an act of supreme craftsmanship, split it into two great pieces. From one half, he fashioned the dome of the heavens, pinning it high above. From the other half, he created the solid earth below. He established the stars, the moon, and the sun, defining the rhythms of time from her eyes. He organized the waters, placing them in their proper courses, but one task remained. The younger gods, now safe, did not want to perform the labor of maintaining this new cosmos. So Marduk devised a final, profound solution. He executed Kingu, Tiamat's commander. From the blood of this defeated god, mixed with clay, Marduk and E created humanity. Our purpose, according to this myth, was explicitly stated. Humanity was made to serve the gods, to bear the burden of labor so the divine could live in ease. In this story, the entire physical world is a monument to a victory. The sky above you is the carved carcass of a vanquished dragon. The ground beneath your feet is her remains. And humanity itself is born from the blood of a rebel, destined for service. It is a cosmos born not from love or loneliness, but from conflict, a permanent order established through the absolute conquest of chaos. The world crafted from a dragon's corpse presents a permanent victory, but what if destruction was not the final enemy, but a necessary part of the cosmic rhythm itself? From the battlefield of Babylonian myth, we enter a universe of breathtaking scale and endless return, where creation is not a singular event but a recurring breath. This is the Hindu vision of a cyclical cosmos, a concept that stretches the imagination across timelines so vast they make human history seem like a single blink. Here, the universe has no ultimate beginning and no final end. Instead, it pulses through immense, repeating cycles of creation, preservation, and dissolution, known as the days and nights of Brahma. To understand this, picture a scene of profound serenity. Before a cycle begins, the cosmos is not a void, but a boundless, dark ocean of potential. Floating upon this cosmic sea, resting on the coils of the endless serpent Shesha, lies the great preserver god Vishnu in a state of deep, dream-filled sleep. Within him, all the possibilities of every past and future universe exist in a latent, unformed state. Then the cycle stirs. From Vishnu's navel, a single, radiant lotus grows, rising from the waters. As its petals unfold, the creator god Brahma emerges seated within it. His awakening marks the start of a new day, a new universe. Brahma's task is to bring forth all the diversity of existence, from the physical realms of stars and planets to the subtle realms of gods and spirits. He populates the cosmos, and the great drama of life, with all its triumphs and tribulations, unfolds across an almost incomprehensible span. A single day in the life of Brahma lasts for 4.32 billion of our human years. But this is not eternity. After 100 of Brahma's years, each composed of 360 of these immense days, the cycle reaches its destined turn. This is when the destroyer, Shiva, performs his cosmic dance. His dance is not an act of malice but of transformative power. It is the force that unravels form, dissolving stars, planets, and all manifested life back into their elemental essence. The universe is not annihilated into nothingness, but rather reabsorbed like a wave settling back into the ocean. It returns to its potential state within the sleeping Vishnu, who rests for a night equal in length to the day, before the lotus rises once more and Brahma is born again to begin the next grand iteration. This cosmology introduces a non-linear concept of time that is more like a spiral than a straight line. Every universe is similar but not identical. It is a grand, eternal process of breathing out and breathing in. Within this framework, our own lives, our civilizations, even our entire world's history, are but fleeting moments within a single exhalation of the divine. It asks a humbling yet expansive question. If the cosmos itself is subject to cycles of birth and death on such a magnificent scale, what does that suggest about the nature of existence itself? Perhaps nothing is ever truly lost, only transformed, waiting in the cosmic ocean for the next dance to begin. That cosmic breath, that eternal cycle of sleep and awakening, presents a universe of serene, inevitable return. Yet the very next myth in our journey confronts us with a creation born not from a dream, but from a scream, a primal act of rebellion and mutilation that forever severed the heavens from the earth. This is the Greek origin story, a tale that begins not with a benevolent creator, but with a gaping, impersonal emptiness called chaos. And from that void, the first real entities emerged not through an act of will, but simply because they could. Gaia, the solid, living earth, rose from the nothingness. So too did the deep gloom of Tartarus, the future pit of the underworld, and Eros, the life force of desire and attraction. Here at the very start we see the essential ingredients for a story, a place, a darkness, and a driving force that compels things to come together. Gaia, now solid and vast, did not wait for a partner. She produced one from her own being. Alone, she gave birth to Uranus, the starry sky, and made him her equal, her husband. This was the first union, the sky forever arching over to embrace the earth. Together they began to create children, but this is where the harmony shattered. Their first offspring were the Titans, 12 immense and powerful beings, but Uranus looked upon them not with pride, but with loathing and fear. He saw them as threats, monsters that should never see the light. So as each was born, he refused to let them leave their mother's body. He forced them back down into the dark womb of Gaia, imprisoning them within the very earth that had borne them. Imagine the agony of Gaia, the living planet, swollen with these trapped, furious beings, unable to release them into the world. Her body became a prison, and her pain grew with each new child, including the one-eyed Cyclopes and the 100-handed Hecatoncheires, whom Uranus also shoved back into her depths. Gaia's suffering curdled into a plot for vengeance. From her own substance, she fashioned a great, jagged sickle of adamantine, a blade of unbreakable grey flint. Then she went to her children, still trapped within her, and presented her plan. Who among them would rise up, take the sickle, and wound their terrible father? Only the youngest Titan, Cronus, possessed the necessary ruthlessness and ambition. He agreed. That night, when Uranus descended once more to cover Gaia in his embrace, Cronus was waiting. He reached out from his hiding place within his mother, and with one swift, brutal motion, he castrated his father. He severed Uranus from the body of Gaia forever. The sky recoiled in agony, wrenching himself upward to the heights where he would remain, forever separated from the earth. This violent division created the permanent space where life could now unfold, the chasm of air between the land and the stars. But the act itself had further grotesque creations. The blood of Uranus as it rained down upon Gaia soaked into the soil. From those drops sprang the Gigantes, the fierce giants, and the Erinyes, the relentless furies whose purpose was to avenge crimes against the natural order. As for the severed flesh itself, Cronus hurled it into the sea. There it drifted upon the waves, and from the white foam or aphras that gathered around it, there arose a figure of breathtaking beauty and power. She was Aphrodite, the goddess of love and desire, born from the castration of the sky and the fertile sea. It is a staggering paradox. The goddess of connection, of attraction and union, emerges directly from an act of ultimate separation and violence. This myth presents a cosmos born from trauma. The world we inhabit, the space between ground and sky, exists because a son mutilated his father. Love itself is a force that springs from that same brutal wound. It is a story that refuses to offer simple origins, instead weaving together pain, rebellion, beauty, and the terrible cost of making room for a new generation to rule. The Greek cosmos was born from a scream of pain, but the next creation was born from a profound silence, a failure to speak the names of the gods. This is the world of the Maya, as told in the sacred book, the Popol Vuh. Here, the universe did not begin with a cosmic egg or a dragon's corpse, but with a quiet, empty sea and sky. The gods, the heart of sky, and the sovereign plumed serpent were already there, floating in the primordial stillness. And they were lonely. They wanted to be praised, to be remembered, to have their names spoken aloud in gratitude. So they began a series of experiments, a divine trial and error to craft the perfect worshipper. Their first attempt was the animal kingdom. They shaped the deer, the birds, the jaguars, and set them in the forests. But while the animals could chirp and roar, they could only repeat their own calls. They could not form the words to speak the gods' names, to offer proper prayers. The gods were dissatisfied. They then tried to make beings from the earth itself. They fashioned figures from wet mud. These mud people could stand, but they were soft and unstable. They could not hold their shape. Their faces were blurred and their speech was garbled. Worse, when the rains came, they simply dissolved back into the earth from which they were made. The experiment was a complete failure. Undeterred, the gods tried a third time. They carved people from wood. These wooden mannequins looked more like humans. They could walk and talk. They could even reproduce, but they had no hearts, no minds, no memories. Their faces were blank and expressionless. They felt no gratitude, offered no worship, and quickly forgot the gods who made them. They were hollow, soulless creatures, and the gods sent a great flood of resin and a swarm of monstrous tools to wipe them away. The few that survived are said to have become the monkeys in the trees. It was only after these failures that the gods found the perfect substance. They consulted the wise elders, the grandmother goddess Exmucane and the grandfather god Expiacock. Together, they discovered that yellow and white maize, ground into a fine flour and mixed with water, formed a dough with the perfect consistency for life. From this sacred maize dough, the gods shaped the first 4 true men. These beings were magnificent. Their vision was so piercing they could see through mountains to the very heart of the universe. The gods, suddenly fearful of their own creation, breathed a mist over their eyes, limiting their sight so they would need faith, not just certainty. But these maize people could speak, and their first words were not of hunger or fear, but of profound thanks. They named the gods, they praised the dawn, and they understood their place in the cosmos. They were the grateful ones, made from the very substance that would sustain their civilization. Yet this creation story is only half the tale, intricately woven with a grand underworld adventure. The current world order, with its reliable sun and moon, was not a given. It was won through a deadly ball game. The hero twins Hunahpu and Expalank were the sons of a ballplayer god who had been tricked and killed by the arrogant lords of the underworld Xibalba. The twins, gifted and clever, took up their father's challenge. They willingly descended into the terrifying darkness of Xibalba, not with brute force but with wit and trickery. They survived a series of deadly houses, one filled with sharp knives, another with freezing cold, another with raging jaguars. They even allowed themselves to be sacrificed in a great fire, only to resurrect themselves in a more powerful form. In their final and most brilliant trick, they performed as dancers and magicians for the underworld lords, even offering to sacrifice a volunteer and bring him back to life. When the eager lords demanded to be sacrificed themselves, the twins obliged, but they chose not to bring them back. They defeated the lords of death not by killing them, but by outsmarting their cruel nature. With the lords of Xibalba vanquished, the twins ascended into the sky. One became the sun, the other the moon. Their victory in the underworld paved the way for the very first dawn, establishing the daily cycle we now take for granted. In this myth, humanity and the cosmos are inextricably linked. We are made from sacred food, created to be participants in a divine relationship, and the very rhythm of our world, the sun's reliable journey, is the direct result of a heroic gamble played out in the realm of shadows, a game where the stakes were nothing less than light itself. But a world won through a ball game in the underworld is a world of heroes and champions. Our next story offers a different kind of genesis, one that begins not in the realm of shadows, but with a deliberate, careful descent from a realm of perfect wisdom. The Yoruba people of West Africa speak of a creation that is a sacred mission, an act of divine craftsmanship that carries a poignant, humanizing flaw. At the start, there was only the sky, the domain of the supreme god Olodumare, and below it, an endless expanse of primordial waters. Olodumare, whose name means the owner of the source of everything, held the materials for a world within his wisdom. He did not create the earth himself. Instead, he entrusted the task to one of his chief deities, the gentle and artistic god Obatala. This is a story of delegation, of a creator who empowers another to bring form to the void. Obatala prepared for his journey with great care. He gathered his sacred tools. He took a simple snail shell, but within it he placed a portion of sacred earth. He brought a 5-toed hen, and he carried a single palm nut. Then he approached the edge of heaven. There was no ladder, no rainbow bridge. There was only a long, golden chain, forged from the will of Olodumare, reaching down into the misty waters below. Obatala began his climb down, hand over hand, descending from the realm of pure spirit into the formless potential of the deep. It was a patient, deliberate act of bridging the two realms. When he reached the end of the chain, he found himself suspended over the vast, empty ocean. He took the snail's shell and poured the portion of earth onto the surface of the water. It was just a small mound, a single point of solidity in the liquid chaos. Then he released the hen. The bird flew down onto the mound and began to scratch and scatter the earth with its feet. Wherever its claws dug, the earth spread outward, growing wider and wider until it formed the first continent, the first solid land. This is a beautifully tactile image of creation. The world is not spoken or sung into being, but physically scattered, shaped by the instinctual action of an animal. With land established, Obatala planted the palm nut. It sprouted immediately, growing into a great, leafy palm tree. Its roots anchored the new earth, and its presence signified life, sustenance, and future prosperity. His primary work complete, Obatala then turned to his greatest act of artistry. He went to a place called Ife, the sacred center of this new world. There, he gathered clay from the earth he had just formed, and he began to sculpt. With the care of a master potter, he shaped the first human figures. He molded their limbs, their faces, their bodies. When each form was perfect, he would call upon Olodumare, who would breathe the spark of life, the divine essence known as Emi, into the clay. These first humans were whole and complete, But the story holds a crucial, compassionate twist. As Obatala worked, he grew thirsty and tired from his long labor under the hot sun. He discovered the sap from the palm tree he had planted could be fermented into a sweet, intoxicating palm wine. He drank from it, and he drank deeply. His divine hands, once so steady, became clumsy. His artistic vision blurred. He continued to shape figures from the clay, but now some were misshapen. Some were blind, some were lame, some were formed differently than he had originally intended. When he awoke from his stupor and saw what he had done, Obatala was filled with profound remorse. He declared that he would forever be the protector of all those who were born with differences, those he had fashioned while under the influence. He made a sacred vow to be their guardian. This myth does not frame disability as a punishment or a curse. It frames it as a consequence of a God's very relatable moment of weakness, a flaw in the process of creation that is met not with rejection, but with a binding oath of protection. It explains the diversity of the human form with empathy, not judgment, and it presents a world born not from violence or conflict, but from a careful, entrusted task, a chain from heaven, a scattering of earth, and the hands of a craftsman who, in a moment of imperfection, made humanity beautifully, irrevocably human. From the empathetic vow of a tipsy creator, we cross to a world born from a single, elegant stir. In the beginning, according to Japan's oldest chronicles, the Kojiki, the heavens and earth were not yet separate. Existence was a drifting, oily chaos like a sea of unformed possibilities. The very first gods emerged from this, but they were distant and passive. It was the seventh generation of deities who were given the active, creative task. They summoned two beings, brother and sister, and named them with profound purpose. He was Izanagi, the male who invites. She was Izanami, the female who is invited. Their names were not just labels, they were a divine job description. The primordial gods presented them with a magnificent tool, the Amenanu-hoko, a spear decorated with glittering jewels. They then directed the pair to the floating bridge of heaven, a nebulous platform between the formless heavens and the churning sea below. Their instruction was simple yet monumental. Take this spear and stir. So Izanagi and Izanami leaned over the bridge's edge and plunged the jeweled spear into the oily brine. They churned the waters, mixing and agitating the primordial substance. When they lifted the spear back out, something miraculous happened. The brine that dripped from its tip was no longer just liquid. It coagulated, thickening and solidifying as it fell. Those drops accumulated, piling upon one another until they formed the very first solid land in all of existence. They named this island Onagoro, the self-condensing island. It was a foundation, a platform upon which all else could be built. Izanagi and Izanami descended from the bridge to stand upon their creation. Recognizing they were now separate beings on solid ground, they performed a marriage ritual. They walked in opposite directions around a central pillar, a celestial post called the Heavenly August Pillar. When they met on the other side, Izanami, the female, spoke first in greeting. "What a fine young man," she said. Izanagi replied, "What a fine young woman." They united, and from this union the islands of Japan were born, one after another, like children. They then gave birth to the myriad kami, the spirits of the mountains, rivers, trees, and winds that would inhabit this new land. This was a period of perfect, productive partnership, a divine collaboration that shaped a world, but this harmony was shattered by a single, catastrophic birth. When it came time to bear the fire god Kagetsuchi, the process was so violent and burning that it mortally wounded Izanami. She died from her burns, descending to the dark and filthy land of the dead, known as Yomi. Izanagi was engulfed in a grief so profound it bordered on madness. He could not accept her loss. In a desperate, reckless act of love, he decided to follow her into the underworld to bring her back. He ventured into the profound darkness of Yomi, calling out for his wife. When he found her, she was shrouded in shadows. She warned him not to look at her, telling him she had already eaten the food of the underworld and could not truly return. But she said she would plead with the gods of Yomi for release. She begged him to wait and, crucially, not to look upon her. Impatient and desperate, Izanagi broke his promise. He took the single tooth from his hair comb, lit it as a torch and held it aloft. The flickering light illuminated a horrific sight. The once beautiful Izanami was now a rotting, maggot-swollen corpse with thunder gods writhing in her decaying flesh. This was not his wife, it was the brutal truth of death. Horrified, Izanagi turned and fled. Humiliated and enraged at being seen in this state, Izanami, now a goddess of death, screamed and sent the hags of Yomi and an army of thunder spirits to chase him. Izanagi barely escaped, blocking the pass to the land of the living with a massive boulder. From opposite sides of that eternal barrier, they spoke their final words. Izanami declared she would strangle 1,000 of the living each day. Izanagi responded that he would cause 1,500 to be born each day. This established the eternal, grim balance between life and death. But Izanagi's ordeal was not over. He had been to a place of profound pollution and he needed purification. As he washed himself in a river, each item of clothing and each part of his body he cleansed gave birth to new, powerful kami. From washing his left eye was born Amaterasu, the radiant sun goddess. From his right eye came Tsukuyomi, the moon god, and from washing his nose emerged Susanoo, the storm god. This traumatic journey, this violent separation from his beloved, did more than just create the islands. It defined the fundamental boundaries of the Japanese cosmos. It carved the irrevocable line between the clean, bright world of the living and the polluted, dark world of the dead. It explained why death brings ritual impurity, and from the very act of cleansing that impurity, the three most important celestial deities were born. The world here is a product of both loving collaboration and devastating, irreversible loss, a balance struck not in peace, but in a frantic flight from the rotting truth of the underworld. The boundary between life and death was carved by grief, but the very space we live in was created by a sun's restless ambition. In the fertile crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the Sumerians gave us one of the oldest written stories of all, etched into clay tablets over 4,000 years ago. Their cosmos began not with an ocean or a void, but with a single sacred mountain. This mountain was not just a geological feature. It was a living entity, a unified being composed of two primordial gods fused into one. And the god of the sky was the summit, the boundless heavens. Kai, the goddess of the earth, was the base, the solid ground. They were locked in an eternal, intimate embrace, a single mass where heaven and earth were indistinguishable. Within this unified mountain, the conditions were ripe for something new. From the union of sky and earth, a third force was born. This was Enlil, the god of air, wind, and storm. He was not just another deity, he was a new principle. He was the very concept of the space between, and as any child does, he began to grow. But Enlil, embodying the restless, expansive nature of the air, could not stay confined within the tight embrace of his parents. He needed room. The myth describes a moment of profound physical necessity. Enlil, now grown powerful, inserted himself between An and Kai. He pushed. With the force of a growing storm, he lifted his father, An, upward, carrying the sky away to its proper, distant realm. He pressed his mother, Kai, downward, anchoring her as the separate, stable earth. This was not a violent rebellion like that of the Greek Cronus, nor a tragic accident. It was a necessary act of definition. By creating that gap, that breathable atmosphere between the solid and the celestial, Enlil made the world habitable. He carved out the arena where life could happen. With the parents separated, the other gods could now be born into this new, structured space. The cosmos became a layered reality, a hierarchy in the distant heavens, Kai as the foundation below, and Enlil ruling the air in between as the most powerful active force in the world. This simple, powerful story establishes a template that echoes across countless cultures. Creation is not always about making something from nothing. Often, it is about creating order through distinction by separating what was once merged. The Sumerian myth gives us the universe as an act of architectural necessity. Before Enlil, there was only a closed, single reality. After Enlil, there was a world with space for stories, for conflict, for cities, and for humanity itself, who would later be fashioned from clay to serve these very gods. It is a genesis of atmosphere, both literal and metaphorical, where the first creative act was simply to make room. Enlil's push created a world with space, but what if the universe began not with separation, but with a being breaking free from its own skin? Across the immense, star-guided expanse of the Pacific Ocean, Polynesian voyagers carried with them a Genesis story of profound intimacy. It is a myth not of conflict or delegation, but of a solitary God transforming his very body into the fabric of the world. In the beginning, there was only the cosmic parent, Taroa. He existed not in a void or a sea, but in a state of utter containment. He was curled inside a cosmic shell known as Rumia. Think of it as a closed universe, a perfect, dark, and silent egg where the creator and the creation were one and the same, with no distinction between the being and its container. Taroa was everything, and everything was Taroa, but it was a cramped, lonely everything. He grew weary of this confinement, of existing in a state of pure potential with no room to breathe or act. So, from within the darkness he stirred, he exerted his will, and the shell cracked. That first rupture was not a violent explosion, but a necessary opening, a birth into spaciousness. The two halves of the shell did not simply fall away. They became the foundational layers of the new cosmos. One great curving half rose to form the sky, what would be called Rangi. The other half settled beneath to form the solid earth, Papa. But Taroa's work had only just begun. He now stood in the space between, but the world was barren. He had no other materials, no other substances to use. So he turned to the only resource available, his own divine body. He used the remaining fragments of the Rumia shell, the substance of his former prison, to craft the bones of the earth, rocks and sand and coral. Then, in an act of staggering self-sacrifice, he reached into his own form. He pulled out his spine, the central pillar of his being, and set it upon the land. It became the first great mountain range, the backbone of the world itself. He plucked his own feathers, and where they fell, they took root and grew, transforming into the forests and trees. Every part of him was offered up. His blood might become the rivers, his flesh the rich soil, his nails the sharp stones. This is creation as the ultimate act of generosity, where the Maker does not command distant materials but becomes the materials. The universe is quite literally Taroa's body, rearranged. It presents a cosmos where the sacred is not distant or separate, but immanent, woven into the very landscape. To stand on a mountain is to stand on the god's spine. To walk through a forest is to move through his feathers. This myth reflects the profound connection Polynesian navigators felt with their environment. The ocean they crossed, the islands they found, the very stars that guided them, all were not just creations of the gods, but were of the gods, a living testament to a primordial sacrifice that made life possible. It asks a beautiful, haunting question. If the world is made from a god's body, what does that mean for our responsibility to it? The world as a god's own body is a vision of profound unity, but what if creation required not a single divine act, but a collective effort from the most unexpected of collaborators? The Cherokee people tell of a beginning that is not lonely but crowded with life, all of them floating above a problem with no ground to stand on. Before land, before mountains or rivers, there was only an endless, watery expanse. And above this universal ocean, all the animals lived in a crowded, sky-bound realm, perched on a rock that hung in the heavens. They looked down at the watery world below and saw its potential, but they had no place to land, no foundation for their lives. They needed solid ground, so they held a council. This was not a command from a distant spirit, but a community meeting among equals, who would be brave enough to dive into the unknown depths to find what they needed. One by one, the strongest and fastest animals volunteered. The loon dove down, but the pressure was too great, and it returned gasping to the surface, empty-handed. The otter tried next, using its sleek skill in the water, but it too failed, floating back up exhausted. The great fish hawk plunged deep, but even it could not reach the bottom. It seemed an impossible task. Then a most unlikely volunteer stepped forward. It was Deunusi, the little water beetle. It was not the strongest nor the fastest, and it certainly did not look like a hero. But it was determined. The water beetle skated across the surface, took a breath, and dove. Down, down, down it went, into the cold, dark silence where the others had turned back. It pushed until it could push no further, reaching the very bottom of the primal sea. There it did not find stone or treasure. It found only soft, yielding mud. With all its might, the beetle gathered a tiny bit of this mud in its legs and began the long, arduous journey back to the surface. When it finally emerged, it placed that small, damp lump onto the surface of the water. And then something miraculous began to happen. The mud did not sink, it started to grow. It expanded outward in every direction, slowly at first, then faster and faster, spreading across the water until it formed a vast, soft island of new earth. This was the first land, born from a speck of mud and the courage of the smallest diver. But this new earth was unstable, wet and loose, drifting on the waters. It needed to be secured, so the animals sent 4 great birds from the highest points of the sky realm, one to each cardinal direction. Each bird took a strong cord and fastened the corners of the new earth to the solid arch of the sky above, anchoring the world in place. Only then, with the land secure, did the Great Spirit act, sending the sun on its first glorious journey across the heavens, warming and drying the mud, making it ready for life. This myth is a masterpiece of humble origins. The entire physical world begins not with a command or a sacrifice, but with a cooperative search and a tiny, tangible payload. It champions the idea that the foundation of everything can rest on the courage of the seemingly insignificant, and that the work of creation is often a communal project where every being, from the mightiest bird to the smallest beetle, has a vital role to play in making the world a home. A world built by community effort is one of shared responsibility, but what if the universe itself was not built to last? The Aztec vision of the cosmos is one of relentless, terrifying cycles, where existence is not a gift but a temporary loan paid for in blood. They believed our world is not the first but the 5th, and it is doomed. This is the myth of the 5 suns, a story of repeated apocalypse and the staggering price of a new dawn. Before our sun, there were 4 previous worlds, each with its own people and each ruled by a different sun. Each one ended in total, catastrophic destruction. The first sun, called 4 Jaguar, was devoured by monstrous jaguars that emerged from the darkness. The second sun, 4 Wind, was swept away by hurricanes that tore the very earth apart. The third sun, 4 Rain, was consumed by a rain of fire that fell from the sky. The fourth sun, 4 Water, was drowned in a global flood that washed everything away. 4 attempts at a stable universe, 4 failures. The gods gathered at the sacred city of Teotihuacan, which means the place where gods are made, faced a dire problem. The world was dark and motionless. To create a 5th sun, a new age, would require the ultimate offering. A god would have to throw themselves into a massive, divine bonfire to be transformed into the new celestial body. 2 deities stepped forward. The first was Tecusistecatl, a proud and wealthy god, adorned in fine feathers and gold. The second was Nanahuatzin, a humble, poor god, covered in sores and clad in simple paper garments. The stage was set for a contest of egos. For 4 days the gods built the pyre. Tecutistecatl made his offerings of precious quetzal feathers and coral. Nanahuatzin offered only balls of grass and his own blood drawn from his scabs. When the fire roared at its peak, the time came to leap. Tecutistecatl, for all his pride, approached the blazing heat and hesitated. The flames were too intense. He stepped back, his courage failing him. He tried a second time and again recoiled in fear. The gods then turned to Nanahuatzin. Without a moment's pause, the humble god closed his eyes, gathered his resolve, and ran straight into the heart of the inferno. His body crackled and burned, consumed in an instant. Shamed by this act of ultimate courage, Tecutistecatl finally found his nerve and leapt in after him. In the heavens, 2 new lights appeared. The first, brilliant and fierce, was Nanahuatzin, transformed into the 5th sun. The second, dimmer and cooler, was the ashamed Tecutistecatl, who became the moon. But the story does not end with their transformation. The new sun and moon hung motionless in the sky, fixed in place. They had no life, no motion, no power to begin the cycle of days. The cosmos remained frozen. The remaining gods realized a final, horrifying truth: the sacrifice was not complete. The sun needed not just a creator, but a fuel, to set the cosmos in motion, to give the sun the energy to move across the sky. They themselves would have to die. And so, in an act of collective duty, the god Quetzalcoatl began to cut out their hearts. One by one, the gods offered themselves up, their life force, their sacred energy, flowing into the sun and giving it the power to rise, to travel its path, and to bring warmth and time to the new world. This is the foundational principle of the Aztec cosmos. The universe runs on sacrifice. The sun does not rise out of kindness, it rises because it was fed. The cosmic order is not a given, it is a transaction, a terrible debt that must be continually repaid. This myth explains why ritual bloodletting and human sacrifice were seen not as cruelty, but as a sacred duty. They were literally feeding the sun, replicating the primordial act of the gods to keep the 5th sun moving, to stave off the inevitable 6th cataclysm for one more day. In this view, every sunrise is a miracle purchased by death, and every life exists on borrowed time under a sun that is, itself, a monument to a humble god's courage and a pantheon's ultimate price. That sun, fed by the hearts of gods, demands a terrible price for its motion. But far to the south, in the thin air of the Andes, a creator emerged who asked for nothing, a god who built civilizations and then simply walked away. This is Viracocha, the Inca lord of creation, whose story is written not just in myth but in the very stones of the high plains. In the beginning, there was only darkness. No sun, no stars, no life. From the deep, cold waters of Lake Titicaca, the highest navigable lake on earth, Viracocha rose alone. His first act was to bring light, commanding the sun, moon, and stars to ascend into the void and begin their cycles. With a world now illuminated, he set to work on his first experiment. From the clay of the earth, he fashioned a race of giants. These beings were immense and powerful, but they lacked wisdom. They wandered the land without purpose, failing to honor their creator or establish order. Displeased, Viracocha made a decisive judgment. He transformed them. With a wave of his hand, he turned the entire disobedient race to stone. To this day, the people of the Andes point to certain colossal, weathered stone formations around the ancient ruins of Tiwanaku and say these are the petrified giants, the failed first draft of creation. But Viracocha was not finished. He sent a great flood to cleanse the world of their legacy, washing the land clean for a new beginning. When the waters receded, he began again, this time with a more durable material. He took stone from the mountains and valleys and carved from it the forms of new people. These were not crude statues, but detailed figures of men and women, of birds and animals, of every tribe and nation that would inhabit the earth. To each stone figure, he gave a specific homeland, Then he breathed life into them, and they stepped forth as the first true humans, emerging from caves, springs, and mountains, already connected to the specific places Viracocha had destined for them. His work as a maker was done, but his greater mission was just beginning. Viracocha then assumed the guise of a wise, bearded old man in simple robes. He began a solitary journey across the harsh and magnificent landscape of the Andes. He walked from village to village, not as a distant deity to be feared, but as a teacher. He taught humanity how to live. He showed them how to weave cloth, how to cultivate the land, how to build terraces and canals. He instructed them in kindness, in social order, and in the crafts that would form the backbone of civilization. He gave them names, languages, and customs. He was the ultimate civilizer, implanting the seeds of culture directly into the world he had sculpted from stone. And then, his work complete, he did something astonishing. He walked to the western edge of the continent, to the shore of the vast Pacific. He did not summon a boat or take flight. He simply stepped onto the waves and walked across the surface of the ocean, disappearing into the horizon. As he departed, he made a promise. He would return one day in a time of need. This final act cemented Viracocha not as a king who rules, but as a wanderer who instructs and then departs, leaving humanity with the tools and the responsibility to maintain the world he crafted. His myth ties every mountain, every spring, every tribe directly to a divine act of carving and breath. It presents a creator who is intimately involved, not in demanding sacrifice, but in imparting knowledge before vanishing into the endless sea, leaving behind a world that is quite literally alive with his stony children. That promise of return, whispered across the waves, speaks to a creator who trusts his work. Yet some worlds are not built on trust, but on an eternal, thundering rivalry. Slavic mythology presents a cosmos defined not by a single maker, but by a perpetual, necessary duel. This is the endless battle between Perun and Veles, a conflict that does not destroy the world, but actually makes it function. Perun is the god of the clear sky, of thunder, lightning, and sacred law. He is order, justice, and the bright, predictable power of the heavens. Veles is his perfect opposite, the god of the fertile but chaotic waters, the deep forests, the underworld, and the magic of cattle and wealth. He is the trickster, the shape-shifter, the force of unpredictable change. Their story is not a simple tale of good versus evil. It is a description of the fundamental forces that keep the universe in balance. The cycle always begins with a provocation from below. Veles, often in the form of a great serpent or a shaggy, horned beast, would slither up from his watery, subterranean realm. His target was never Perun directly, but the things Perun held sacred. He would steal the thunder god's celestial cattle, the clouds that watered the earth. Sometimes the myth says he would even abduct Perun's children or his wife, symbols of order and domesticity. This theft was an act of chaos, a disruption of the proper celestial order. It could not stand. Enraged, Perun would take up his mighty axe forged from lightning and stone. He would mount his chariot and give chase across the vault of the sky. The pursuit was a spectacle of raw power. As Perun hurled his lightning bolts at the fleeing serpent, the sound was the crash of thunder, the flashes were the illumination of the heavens. Veles, desperate to escape, would dive into the waters, hide behind trees, or burrow into the earth, but Perun's strikes would split oak trees and boil the rivers in his fury. The battle would rage until Perun finally struck a decisive blow, defeating Veles and forcing him to retreat back to his underworld domain. But here is the crucial, beautiful twist. This was never a final victory. It was a seasonal, eternal reset. The conflict itself was the engine of life. The lightning that Perun hurled did not just punish Veles, it purified the earth. The rains that followed the thunderstorm, born from the chaos of the chase and the release of the stolen cattle clouds, were what nourished the crops. Veles's chaotic, fertile waters were necessary for growth, but they had to be properly directed by the sky's authority. their struggle defined the very structure of reality. Perun ruled the vertical, the world above, the realm of gods and law. Veles ruled the horizontal, the world below and around, the realm of spirits, magic, and the wealth of the earth. The Great World Tree, a central pillar in Slavic belief, stood between them, its roots in Veles's wet domain and its branches reaching into Perun's sky. Their fight was the tension that held the tree upright. This myth presents a universe sustained by dynamic opposition. Without Veles's chaotic theft, there would be no reason for Perun to bring the life-giving storm. Without Perun's punishing order, Veles's fertile chaos would flood and overgrow the world. It is a cosmic system that thrives on a quarrel, where the very weather is a divine argument, and every clap of thunder is a reminder that the world is alive with competing essential powers. The thunderous duel of Slavic gods echoes across the heavens, but the next mystery descends from a single, specific point of light. For the Dogon people of Mali, the entire story of creation is written in the stars, focused on the brightest one in our night sky, Sirius. Their cosmology does not begin with a void or an ocean, but with a precise celestial map and a visitation. According to their traditions, the supreme creator, Amma, shaped the universe from a single, spinning seed of matter. But the beings who brought that knowledge to Earth, who taught humanity how to live, came from far away. They were the Nommo, and they arrived in an arc from the Sirius star system. The Nommo are described not as gods in the distant sense, but as tangible, amphibious beings. They are masters of water, often depicted as fish-like creatures, sometimes with humanoid torsos. They are the civilizers, the teachers who descended from the sky to give the Dogon the foundations of society, agriculture, and, most astonishingly, an intricate understanding of the cosmos itself. The Dogon say that the Nommo's home was not just the bright star we see, but a complex system. They speak of Sirius as having a tiny, incredibly heavy companion star, a star that orbits the primary every 50 years. They describe this companion as made of a metal heavier than iron, a star so dense that all earthly substances are light in comparison. For centuries, this was seen as a beautiful but impossible myth. Then, in the 19th century, Western astronomers discovered that Sirius did indeed have a companion, a white dwarf star now called Sirius B. It is invisible to the naked eye, requires a powerful telescope to see, and orbits its brighter partner in a cycle of just over 50 years. A white dwarf is, in fact, one of the densest forms of matter in the universe, where a single teaspoonful would weigh many tons on Earth. The Dogon knowledge appeared to match the scientific discovery with uncanny precision, long before the telescopes existed to prove it. This convergence has ignited a firestorm of debate that continues to this day. How could a people without written records or optical instruments know such a specific detail about a distant star? One line of thought points to the possibility of ancient contact, of the Nommo story being a cultural memory of visitors from another world who shared advanced knowledge. Another, more grounded explanation lies in the profound power of oral tradition. The Dogon's astronomical lore is not a single fact, but part of a vast, intergenerational system of knowledge, encoded in rituals, sand drawings, and masked dances performed over decades. It is a living library where initiates learn complex cosmological principles through years of patient teaching. Some scholars suggest this knowledge could have been influenced by contact with European astronomers centuries ago, though the Dogon fiercely maintain its ancient origin. Others propose it represents a brilliant, indigenous form of long-term astronomical observation, where patterns noted over generations were woven into a spiritual narrative. Whether the source was celestial or terrestrial, the Dogon myth stands as a monumental testament to human curiosity. It frames the universe not as a backdrop, but as an active participant in our story. It suggests that the deepest truths about existence might be found not only by looking inward at our own planet's myths, but by looking upward and remembering a time when teachers, perhaps even starlight itself, came down to show us the way. A celestial bird can build a universe without ever intending to. From the cosmic duel of Perun and Veles, we journey north to the snow-edged forests and silent lakes of Finland, where creation is not a battle or a sacrifice, but a quiet, patient waiting game. The epic poem, the Kalevala, begins not with a god's command, but with a mother's loneliness. For 700 years, the goddess Ilmatar, the daughter of the air, drifted in the endless, dark primordial sea. She was the only being in existence, a solitary consciousness floating in the watery void, yearning for something she could not name. She was not building or willing a world into being. She was simply there, a presence in the formless deep. Then, a change in the wind. A great storm arose, churning the waters for centuries more. The sea and the wind made love to the lonely goddess, and she became the mother of the waters, pregnant with possibility. Yet still she waited, floating and dreaming, with no solid land upon which to bear her child. The world remained an unborn thought. The catalyst for creation arrived not from a divine plan, but from the instinct of a small, living creature. A teal, a beautiful diving duck, was searching for a place to nest. It flew across the trackless sea until it spotted the only possible resting place in all the universe, the knee of the floating goddess Ilmatar. Seeing it as a small, dry hill in the middle of the watery expanse, the teal landed and built its nest. There, upon the knee of the patient mother, it laid 6 eggs of gold and a 7th made of iron. For days the teal sat, warming its clutch. Ilmatar, feeling the warmth of life upon her skin, remained perfectly still. She did not command the bird or direct the process. She simply allowed it to happen, a host to a tiny, natural miracle. Then, moved by a sudden, involuntary sensation, perhaps the ache of her long gestation or the heat from the eggs, she gently twitched her knee. It was a tiny motion, but in the perfect balance of that primordial moment, it was enough. The eggs tumbled from their nest, falling into the dark, cold waters below. They did not sink, they shattered, and from their broken pieces the universe assembled itself. This was not a violent explosion, but a gentle, fruitful accident. The yolk, bright and warm, floated upward and became the sun, bringing light and warmth. The white, cool and luminous became the moon. The speckled fragments of the shells scattered across the dark to become the stars. The darker pieces drifted to form the clouds in the new sky, but the largest pieces held the structure of the world itself. The lower half of one great shell curved upward to form the dome of the heavens. The upper half sank down to become the cradle of the earth. Here, the substance of a simple nest egg becomes the very fabric of the cosmos. What makes this myth so profoundly different is its passivity. Ilmatar is not a craftsman like Viracocha or a warrior like Marduk. She is a vessel, a resting place. The teal is not a god, but an animal following its own innocent nature. The creation of the sun, moon, and stars is a beautiful side effect of a mother's slight movement and a bird's nesting instinct. It presents a cosmos born from cooperation between the divine and the mundane, where the monumental arises from the small, the gentle, and the utterly unintentional. The universe in this telling is not a planned monument, but a happy, luminous accident, its very structure forged from the fragile shell of a bird's egg. A perfect sphere, static and unchanging, was the first material universe. In the ancient Persian vision of Zoroastrianism, the supreme god of wisdom and light, Ahura Mazda, did not begin with chaos or water. He began with a perfect spiritual idea, a flawless blueprint for existence. He first brought forth the Menog, the spiritual world, a realm of pure thought and divine intention. Only then did he manifest the Getig, the material world, shaping it into a motionless, luminous sphere, a cosmic jewel suspended in the void. This was creation as an act of perfect order, a sanctuary of light. To inhabit this pristine realm, Ahura Mazda then fashioned 2 perfect beings. The first was Gayamad, the primordial man, a being of such radiance he shone like the sun, immortal and without flaw. The second was the primordial bull, a source of boundless fertile life. Together, they were to be the guardians and progenitors of all that would live within this perfect sphere. But perfection in this cosmology is a target. From the beginning, there existed an opposing force, not a rival creator, but a destructive spirit of chaos, lies, and ruin named Angra Mainyu. Where Ahura Mazda was light and truth, Angra Mainyu was darkness and deception. This evil spirit looked upon the perfect material world and coveted it for corruption. He launched an invasion, a violent assault upon the static sphere. His first and most devastating blow was not against the mountains or the seas, but against life itself. He attacked and killed both the radiant Gaimard and the fertile bull. This was the catastrophic event that shattered the original perfection. Mortality, suffering, and decay entered the world not as a natural part of the cycle, but as a poison injected by an external, malignant force. Death was a crime, not a plan. Yet from this act of cosmic murder, new life stubbornly sprang. The myth tells us that the seed of the slain Gaimard was purified by the light of the sun. After 40 years, it grew into a rhubarb plant, and from that plant emerged the first human couple, Mashia and Mashiana. Similarly, from the seed of the slain bull sprouted all manner of plants and grains, and from its body came the ancestors of all beneficial animals. This is the profound, dual-edged heart of the story. Angra Mainyu introduced death, but in doing so, he inadvertently triggered the process of procreation, of life spreading and diversifying across the wounded world. The universe became a battlefield in that moment, and it has remained one ever since. Every human life, every growing plant, is therefore part of the legacy of that first murder and the resilient response of creation. Our existence is framed as a front line in a war between cosmic light and darkness, where every good thought, word, and deed is a blow struck for the original order of Ahura Mazda, and every act of cruelty or deceit furthers the corruption of Angra Mainyu. It is a myth that removes all ambiguity. The struggle between good and evil is not a metaphor or a social construct. It is the literal foundation of the material world, written into our very origins with the death of a shining man and a sacred bull. That cosmic war between light and darkness leaves little room for middle ground, but what if the universe was not a battlefield but a feast? The Celts of ancient Europe wove tales not of a single genesis, but of a world sustained by a continuous magical exchange. Their focus was less on how the cosmos began and more on how it keeps going, season after season, life after life. At the heart of this belief lies the otherworld, a realm that exists just beside our own, separated by the thinnest of veils. It is a place of perpetual summer where apple trees bear fruit year-round, music floats on the air, and no one grows old or sick. You might find its entrance in the side of a grassy mound, at the bottom of a glassy lake, or at the center of an ancient forest. To gain passage, you often needed a key, and that key was usually a silver branch hung with tinkling bells. Carrying it showed you were under the protection of the otherworld's rulers, and its sound was the very music of that eternal realm. This is not a distant heaven or a forgotten past. The otherworld is a parallel present, a reservoir of pure vitality that constantly feeds into our own. And the symbol of that endless nourishment is the cauldron. These were not ordinary pots. The Dagda, the good god and father of the tribe, possessed one that was bottomless. No matter how many men gathered around it, his cauldron would always provide enough food, and it had the power to restore life itself. In another famous Welsh cycle, the Mabinogion, heroes embark on a perilous quest to recover a magical cauldron that can resurrect the dead, though they come back silent, having seen things beyond speech. These cauldrons represent the ultimate source. They are cosmic containers of regeneration, where what is spent is replenished, where what is broken can be made whole. They suggest that creation is not a finished work, but an ongoing process of pouring forth. Our world, with its cycles of growth and harvest, of death and rebirth, is merely the visible outflow from that divine, inexhaustible vessel. The universe, in this view, is layered like the roots of a great oak. Our tangible reality is the trunk and branches we see, but it is fed by a hidden root system tapping into the deep, moist soil of the other world. The silver branch is a token of that connection, a reminder that the magic is not gone, it is merely interlaced with the mundane. A king's prosperity, a bard's inspiration, the fertility of the land itself, all were seen as gifts flowing from that other side into this one, mediated through sacred objects, rightful rulers, and proper rituals. So while the Celts may not have told a story of a first dawn, they told a more intimate one. They spoke of a cosmos that is alive and hungry, not for sacrifice but for relationship. It is a world sustained by a continuous feast where the cauldron never empties, and the branch, if you know where to look, is always in bloom just on the other side of the hill. But a cauldron's endless feast requires a world with space to gather around it. The Armenian story of origin returns us to that primal, claustrophobic intimacy of a unified cosmos, where creation is once again an act of courageous rebellion within the family. In their ancient telling, the universe did not begin with emptiness or water. It began as a single, living marriage. Heaven and earth were not distant realms, but a husband and wife locked in a tight, eternal embrace. They were one entity, and within that unity they produced many children. Yet this was not a happy home. The children lived in perpetual darkness, trapped in the narrow, suffocating space between their parents' bodies. There was no room to move, to breathe, or to see. Light itself was impossible. The world was a crowded, dark womb with no exit. The children, who would become humanity, lived in a state of longing, desperate for air and illumination. The catalyst for change came from the eldest son. While the specific name varies, he is a figure of immense strength, often associated with the storm or the vital force of the air itself. He looked upon the plight of his siblings and made a fateful decision. He would not accept this darkness. Using his great might, he placed his hands upon his father, heaven, and heaved upward with all his strength. At the same moment, he pressed down upon his mother, earth. It was a colossal, straining effort, a divine act of separation that required every ounce of his power. He pushed and pushed until, with a final, monumental surge, he succeeded. Heaven was wrenched high into the vastness above, becoming the distant, starry sky. Earth was settled firmly below, becoming the solid ground, and between them, that precious, empty space his siblings had craved. It was the atmosphere, the breathable air, and with it came the first glorious flood of light. The children were no longer trapped. They stepped into the open, blinking in the newfound brightness, feeling the wind on their faces for the very first time. In that moment, they became the first humans, filled with profound gratitude for the light and the air their brother had won for them. This myth, so similar in structure to the Sumerian and Greek stories, carves the world from a domestic struggle. It is not a battle against a monster, but a necessary intervention within a family that has become too close, too stifling. The hero is not a distant creator, but the firstborn child who acts to improve the world for his brothers and sisters. The sky is a father sent to his proper, lofty place. The earth is a mother given room to nurture, and humanity itself is born from that grateful first breath of free air, forever indebted to the sibling who made space for us to exist. It frames our entire reality as a gift born from a single, selfless act of separation, a familial argument that literally opened up the world. But a world sustained by ceremony is a world of constant, sacred conversation. The plains of North America hold a story not of how the earth was made, but of how to live upon it with meaning. For the Lakota people, the most profound gift did not come at the beginning of time, but in a moment of human need. Long ago, the people were suffering, they were hungry, and their prayers seemed to go unheard. 2 scouts were sent out to hunt for buffalo, the source of life. As they searched, they saw a figure approaching in the distance. At first, it appeared to be a beautiful young woman dressed in white buckskin. But as she drew closer, they realized something miraculous. She was walking, yet her feet did not touch the ground. One of the scouts was filled with an impure thought and moved toward her with disrespect. A great cloud suddenly enveloped him, and when it cleared, only a pile of bones remained. The other scout fell to his knees in reverence. The woman spoke to him, and she identified herself as Tesson Y, White Buffalo Calf Woman. She told him to return to his people and prepare for her arrival, for she was bringing a great gift. The people did as instructed, building a sacred lodge. When White Buffalo Calf Woman entered their circle, she carried with her a bundle. Inside was the chanunpa, the sacred pipe. She presented it to the people, and with it she gave them the ceremonies that would define their existence. She showed them how every part of the pipe was a map of the universe. The wooden stem represented all that grows upon the earth, the realm of the living. The carved stone bowl represented the earth itself, the red stone a reminder of the blood and flesh of all creatures. When joined together, the pipe connected the earthly and the spiritual, creating a living axis between the people and Wakon Tanka, the great mystery, the sacred power that animates all things. She taught them the specific prayers, the way to fill the pipe with sacred tobacco, and how its smoke would carry their words upward. This was not just a ritual, it was a technology for maintaining balance. She then gave them the 7 sacred rites, including the sun dance and the vision quest, ceremonies designed to renew the people and the world. Before she left, she made a promise. She walked away, and as she did, she transformed. She rolled upon the earth, becoming a black buffalo, then a yellow one, then a red one, and finally a white buffalo calf. She then vanished over the horizon. Her transformation was a covenant. She promised to return one day, and the birth of a rare white buffalo calf is seen as a sign of her presence and a call to remember the sacred ways. This story is the cornerstone of Lakota life. It does not explain the origin of stars or mountains. Instead, it explains the origin of responsibility. The cosmos, in this view, was already here, but it was waiting to be brought into proper relationship. The pipe ceremony does not merely commemorate a past event, it actively recreates that moment of connection. When the stem is joined to the bowl, heaven and earth are symbolically united once more. The smoke becomes the breath of the world, carrying gratitude, sorrow, and hope directly into the heart of the sacred. In this way, the Lakota universe is not a static creation, but a dynamic partnership. It is sustained not by a one-time act, but by the daily, conscious choice to pray, to honor, and to live in balance. The pipe is a reminder that we are not separate from the cosmos. We are participants in its ongoing conversation, and our ceremonies are the words we speak to keep the world alive. Yet even a world built from prayer can have a beginning older than the gods themselves. Deep within the oldest clay tablets of Sumer, before the sky was pushed away by Enlil, before the great gods An and Kai were even separate, there is a name that whispers from the very first drop of existence. Namu, she was not a goddess of a place, she was the place. Namu was the personification of the Abzu, the vast, dark, subterranean ocean of fresh water that flowed beneath the world. This was not the chaotic salt sea of Tiamat, but a deep, quiet, nurturing source, the sweet water that gives life to the land from below. And in the most ancient fragments of poetry and myth, she stands utterly alone at the start of all things. There was no partner, no conflict, no command. There was only Namu, the primeval waters, the cosmic womb. From herself, from her own silent, boundless depths, she gave birth. The first beings to emerge from her were heaven and earth, An and Kai, not yet separated but born as her children. She may have also birthed the first generation of active gods directly. She is the ultimate source, the creative waters from which the entire Mesopotamian cosmos, with all its later drama and hierarchy, would eventually flow. This is a staggering idea. Before any of the famous stories of storm gods and dragon battles, before any pantheon was organized, the Sumerians envisioned the absolute origin as a single, feminine force. Namu is the primeval mother in the most literal sense, the self-sufficient source of all that is. her existence highlights a profound, early recognition of a creative feminine principle at the absolute beginning of everything. She represents the generative power of the deep, dark, and life-giving waters, a power that is foundational, not derived. Yet as the centuries passed and empires rose, the stories shifted. The active, dramatic tales of male gods like Enlil and Marduk, who impose order through force and cunning, moved to the forefront of the culture. Namu, the quiet, primordial source, receded into the background of the mythic memory, becoming more of a venerable ancestor than an active power. She was never forgotten, but her supreme creative role was often overshadowed by the louder, more political narratives of the later pantheon. Her presence in those ancient texts is a haunting reminder. It suggests that our oldest stories about beginnings might have often sprung from a deep, intuitive understanding of origin as an act of generation, of nurturing emergence from a dark, watery source, a concept that, in many traditions, was gradually rewritten by the myths of a newer, more patriarchal world. Conflict between sky and sea is not always a cosmic flaw. Sometimes it is the very forge from which humanity is hammered into being. In the vast archipelago of the Philippines, the Tagalog people tell of a world that began with only two realms and two gods locked in a perpetual, thunderous argument. Above was Bathala, the benevolent but mighty sky god, ruler of the heavens and the winds. Below was Amun Sinaya, the powerful and temperamental goddess of the sea. Their domains met at a razor-thin horizon, and they did not meet in peace. They were rivals, their divine wills constantly clashing. When Bathala sent his winds to sweep the ocean, Amun Sinaya would churn her waters into towering waves in defiance. Their battles were the storms that lashed the primordial world, a ceaseless cycle of challenge and retaliation that made the universe a turbulent, unstable place. There was no land, no creature, no respite, only the endless struggle between the high blue and the deep green. This was a cosmos defined by pure opposition, a divine tension with no mediator and no end in sight. Then a small intervention changed everything. A lone bird, perhaps a tern or a kingfisher, was caught between these warring domains. Tired of the endless tempest, it sought a way to bring peace. It found a single, jointed pole of bamboo, a hollow, resilient reed, and carried it in its beak. With a hopeful drop, it let the bamboo fall into the churning sea below. The bamboo did not float away gently. It was seized by the violent waves of Amun Sinaya and hurled repeatedly against the sharp, rocky teeth of Bathala's realm, the first solid protrusions from the deep. The sea crashed it against the sky's stones again and again, in a furious percussion that echoed the god's own strife. And then it split. The sturdy bamboo, having withstood the brutal force of both elements, cracked cleanly down the middle. This was not a destruction, but a revelation. From one half of the shattered pole, a man stepped forth. His name was Malokas, meaning strong. From the other half emerged a woman named Maganda, meaning beautiful. They were not fashioned by a careful potter or breathed from a creator's essence. They were released. Their birth was a direct consequence of the collision, a product of the very conflict that had defined existence. In that moment, the endless battle found a new purpose. The presence of these first humans, strong and beautiful, born from an object that had endured the clash, gave the gods a reason to cease their war. They turned their attention from fighting each other to nurturing this new, fragile life. The storms subsided. The sea and sky settled into a balance, a dynamic truce that allowed the world to become hospitable. Land emerged, and Malokas and Maganda became the ancestors of all people. This myth frames humanity as the ultimate peacemakers, but not through diplomacy. We are the living resolution. Our origin is not in a garden of ease, but in a crucible of opposition. The bamboo pole is a perfect symbol, hollow yet strong, flexible yet capable of splitting open to reveal life when subjected to immense pressure. It suggests that our very existence is the beautiful, resilient result of elemental forces finding a common ground, not in quiet but in a tremendous creative crash. From a bamboo pole split by a divine quarrel, we arrive at a voice that speaks the cosmos into existence from absolute silence. Our final myth is not one of many gods but of one. In the beginning, the book of Genesis tells us God created the heavens and the earth, but the earth was formless and empty, a void shrouded in darkness, with only the Spirit of God hovering over the face of the deep waters. This is a starting point of pure potential, but it is not nothing. It is a canvas of watery chaos awaiting a command, and then God speaks. The first creative act is not a physical struggle, a birth, or a sacrifice. It is an utterance, "Let there be light," and with those words, light simply is. It obeys. This is creation ex nihilo, out of nothing, through the sheer power of divine will expressed as speech. The word itself is the tool of creation. What follows is not a chaotic emergence, but a systematic, almost architectural process. Over 6 days, God performs acts of separation and population, bringing order from the formless void. On the first day, light is separated from darkness, creating day and night. On the second, a firmament is placed in the midst of the waters to separate the waters above from the waters below, creating sky. On the third, the waters under the sky are gathered into one place so dry land appears, and the land is commanded to produce vegetation. Each day builds logically upon the last, establishing domains and then filling them. The sun, moon, and stars are placed in the firmament to govern the day and night. The waters teem with living creatures and birds fill the sky. The land brings forth animals. This is a universe of distinct realms, each with its own inhabitants, a carefully ordered hierarchy established by fiat. Then comes the culmination. God says, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness." Humanity is not an accidental byproduct or a being crafted from leftover materials. They are the intentional climax of the creative week, fashioned in the very image of the Creator. They are given a unique role to rule over the fish, the birds, and all creatures, and are blessed to be fruitful and multiply. They are placed in a garden, a perfect environment, and given one prohibition as a test of their obedience and free will. This story introduces concepts that would ripple through millennia. Here is a single, transcendent, and personal deity, entirely separate from the creation yet intimately involved with it. The cosmos is not eternal, cyclical, or born from conflict within a divine family. It has a definite beginning, a linear trajectory, and a purpose. Time itself becomes an arrow, moving from a point of origin toward a destined future. This framework of a purposeful creation by a rational God would become the bedrock of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, shaping not just theology but the very foundations of Western science and philosophy, which long sought to understand the laws of a universe believed to be ordered by a divine mind. Of all the stories we have witnessed, this one places ultimate creative power not in a body, a battle, or a song, but in a word spoken into the void. It suggests that at the heart of everything, before matter or energy, there was meaning, expressed as a command that became the world. 25 windows, each offering a breathtaking view into the deepest questions we have ever asked. From the lonely patience of Ilmater to the thunderous duel of Perun and Veles, from the humble water beetle to the self-sacrifice of Taroa, these are not mere fictions from a forgotten past. They are the foundational language of human wonder. Every culture, looking up at the same infinite night, crafted a story to bridge the terrifying gap between the unknown and the known. These myths gave chaos a name, gave the void a shape, and gave humanity a role to play in the grand narrative of existence. They explained why the sun moves, why we must die, and why we are here. In doing so, they did something even more remarkable. They connected the cosmos to the community, the stars to the soil, making the universe a place that was not just observed but intimately lived within. Whether the world is a songline, a god's body, or a word spoken into the dark, each story is a testament to our relentless need to find meaning in the vastness. So, which of these 25 visions of the beginning spoke to you? Was it the heroic effort of Pangu, the communal counsel of the animals, or the solemn promise of the pipe? Let that conversation continue below. If this journey through the cradle of the cosmos left you in awe, help others find it. A like, a subscription, and that notification bell ensure you never miss our next dive into history's greatest enigmas. Thank you for watching, and remember, the greatest mystery is that we are here at all, able to tell these stories. Until next time, keep looking up.